A couple of years ago, I reviewed the first Psychonauts game. I said it was good, but I didn't play the game that much, and I blame Pokemon X and Y for that, because those games came out at the same time I was going to review Psychonauts. There's times I'll get the occasional comment about a review of mine being the worst I ever made. Usually it's someone who's mad that I didn't like the game as much as they did. But if I were to list off reviews that I did that I thought were the worst, Psychonauts would be on that list. I can sometimes be against sequels to games that take a long time to come out, as they usually end up a disappointment, and not living up to the expectation, as it's been 16 years since the first Psychonauts game. But this one does retain the same art style and absurd humor writing as the first game, so the presentation is on par with the first game, which is good. And like the first Psychonauts, it's a platform game. You can jump, double jump, and float around the areas using your psychic powers to attack and open up new paths. The platforming is really fun, and the minds of everyone that you run into, each with their own gimmicks and themes. Raz Controls about as well as Mario in a Mario game, although his running animation looks like he's running faster than he actually is. So I mostly use the levitation ball to get around faster. Raz can grab and throw things with his telekinesis, although having it grab what you want to grab is not as accurate as I would like it to be. In one area, I was trying to grab ingredients for a puzzle, but it would grab the wrong ones multiple times, and those puzzles were on timers. Pyrokinesis does an area and effect damage, but getting it to where you want it outside of combat, like burning paintings on walls, can be a bit of a hassle. The time bubble is great for slowing down enemies. Big enemies aren't slowed down for that long, but it always helps with platforming by slowing down moving objects. And there's really no indicator on where it'll affect. I think it's mostly contextual. Side Blast is mostly how I attacked, along with using the time bubble. It makes you a bit overpowered in a scuffle, and I think the designers knew this because towards the end of the game, they do throw a lot of hard-hitting enemies at you in large quantities, like panic attacks. Clairvoyance is useless for most of the game until you reach rank 102, where abilities don't have cooldowns. It's only used a handful of times to find optional items and to defeat enemies called bad moods, and I think I maybe fought 5 of them. Mental Connection is for traveling along thought bubbles, which feels redundant with levitation, and it's only used for optional stuff after you finish the area it's a gimmick for is required. Projection is not really that important and is like Mental Connection. It's only used for optional stuff after you finish the area its gimmick is required. Switching side powers is annoying. You need to hold up on the D-pad, circle the analog stick around, and press a shoulder button to assign it. That really feels like 6th generation clunck that carried over. If the arrow is already on a power that you want to select, you need to move it away and then move it back to the one that you wanted, otherwise it doesn't register. Inside the minds of the characters you come across is similar to previous games. They're all strange and fantastic, enemies are puns on different types of psychological things, and only 2 of them have a gimmick to them, like entering Agent Forsyth's mind, so this way you can use mental connections to have her think a different way, and Cassie has you using projection to slip through areas and unlock doors. But those are the only areas where you are required to use those powers to progress. Some areas are unnecessarily long. There's a mission to put Ford Crawler's mind back together. You have to go into 3 different versions of him, and each version needs a side mission for you to complete. 2 of them are not that long. The first one just requires you get full access from a guy running the Psychonauts. The second has you go into the woods to get bees. Then you gotta play a puzzle-solving minigame and then a boss fight in someone's mind. But for the third, you need to get into the mailroom and you need to borrow a brain for the brainless mail clerk. And you end up in Psyking's sensorium, and you have to help them remember who they are. And this took way too long, and I was already on a long quest to put Ford's mind back together, which was, again, 3 missions on its own. Because Psyking's Sensorium is one area with 3 sub-areas. Bob's Bottles and Cassie's collections were also really long when compared to other areas, but nowhere near as long as Psyking's Sensorium. Well, Bob's Bottles, because, like Psyking's Sensorium, it's also one area with 3 sub-areas. And these 3 areas feel like they were made as large as they are to pad the game out. It's 12 hours long, and those 3 areas could have been significantly trimmed down, and you would still get maybe an 8 to 9 hour story. With hours of exploration and collecting, and there's a lot to look for side cards, emotional baggage, figments of the imagination, and so much more stuff to grab if you want to 100% complete the game. As for the story, it takes place right after the first Psychonauts and is a continuation of the story from there. It's got that quirky humor that Double Fine is known for, and is entertaining for the most part, but Psyking Sensorium and Bob's Bottles being where the story drags its feet the most. I understand that they try to make these sections meaningful, but because they're so long, you just want them to end as they overstay their welcome. Cassie's Collections is also guilty of that, but not to that degree. I did run into one game-breaking bug, and it was a weird one. I got the PC version, and if you're using a wireless controller and the battery dies, just shut the game off, replace the batteries, and reboot the game. Because menus will not work otherwise. Sure, Raz Controls just the same as usual and you could play the game just fine, but once you get into a menu, they will not respond to the controller's B button or shoulder buttons, and even more weird, it will not respond to keyboard inputs either, which makes no sense to me, but it will respond to mouse clicks. Other than that, it's a great Psychonauts sequel. Do I think it's worth $60? Not really, because some story elements are sloppy, like Raz's family guilting him for running away in the first game, saying that they're used to doing things on their own without him, like he was gone for years, when he was only gone for a few days. And of course, Psyking Sensorium's, Bob's Bottles, and Cassie's Collections being way too long. And there's some clunk with selecting and using psi powers. Some psi powers are useless for a majority of the game. And I think that maybe 40 to 50 would be a more fair price, but hey, if you like the first Psychonauts, you will definitely enjoy this one.